Some countries have started easing restrictions in a second phase of returning to normal life. Welcome to this edition of Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Anne Nwawadu. As some nations ease a coronavirus lockdown, there is still a need to be very cautious and maintain every rule to stop the spread. Let's see some of the countries where the lockdowns have been eased.
Some Italians embrace the news of the ease on lockdown. Under phase 2 of the ease, relatives can reunite in small groups. For Silvia Poletta's 3 kids, it has been a 2-month wait, but now they will reunite with their grandma in the countryside. Parks will reopen and residents will be allowed outside. For Poletta's husband, Maurizio Levante, he admits it is a big step after 2 months inside.
I'm a bit even scared about this. It won't be normal life, it will be a different life, I think, for everybody.
During phase 2, manufacturing and construction will also start again. Another sector set to restart is the auto industry, but car dealers are apprehensive that there will not be buyers. Francesco Baboccia is the owner of the car dealership Baboccia Auto SRL, which has been in his family for 100 years. He fears that many in the business will have no choice but to close, and this has been the most difficult period his company has ever experienced.
There's a mix of excitement and fear because the question is who will come when we reopen to buy a car. This is a game changing for all of us and certainly for the automotive dealerships. In 2008, the market dropped down after the financial crisis of 23%, so less than a half survived that crisis. Now we're looking at figures of minus 30%, so many of us will not survive.
It is a sentiment shared by those businesses who have to wait another month to reopen, such as hairdressers, beauticians and restaurants. But the government says a slow and staged reopening is the only way Italy can move forward. Reopen factories and train stations adapt to a new way of life of strict social distancing and mandatory masks as Italy moves into phase 2, a gradual lifting of lockdown restrictions. At the NTN Exa factory that produces metal bearings for cars, planes and buses in San Benigno Canavese near Turin, all workers had their temperatures checked as they entered the building. Inside, arrows have been placed on communal corridors throughout the building, indicating a one-way system for workers to ensure social distancing rules are met. Social distancing indicators are now a common sight on public transport, with large red stop signs on train seats and bus windows.
I hope people will have common sense and understand that even if they can move around, they still have to be cautious and that they have to act in a responsible way.
I hope in the coming weeks there will be no new surge in the infections and not to go back to quarantine.
Common sense is prevailing in this beginning phase, a phase during which the city is awakening. We have not seen people without masks. We did not see gatherings. The safety distances have so far been respected. And we have trust in the common sense of each person.
With almost 29,000 deaths from COVID-19 since its outbreak emerged on February the 21st, Italy has the world's second highest toll after the United States. Grandfather Domenico Di Massa could not have been happier when he heard about the relaxation of the lockdown. He throws his granddaughter in the air, celebrating the freedom. And for grandmother Mariantonia Gangemi, she could only look on at the emotional reunion as the family started the first phase in getting to know each other again, wearing masks. 5-year-old Cecilia has gone 2 months without seeing her grandparents. Normally, she would have seen them on a weekly basis. Many Italians will normally leave young children with grandparents in July before taking holiday from work in August. This year, it will probably be a much longer time for many Italians needing help from grandparents.
One main change will be having to go back to work and not being able to stay with my daughter because schools are closed and therefore she has to go with her grandparents, and so I'll see her during weekends.
Schools are not due to reopen until September, and while some old rituals returned, many curbs stayed in place to try to prevent a resurgence of COVID-19.
The United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, has partnered with the newly formed Citizens Task Force on COVID-19 to create awareness on the virus and its dangers and how they can combat it whilst protecting themselves and the people around them. Take a look.
The group is made up of citizens from every walk of life in South Sudanese society. They came together after they saw there was a need to address the misconceptions about the virus.
Are you talking about the coronavirus disease, also known as COVID-19?
The partnership with UN Mission takes the form of a 14-day outreach event using a promo truck which rides around Juba, the capital, and throughout the country broadcasting messages in local languages.
We're using the standard messages approved by WHO, which mainly focuses on washing hands. What we're doing is we contextualize that and make sure that at least we inform the people about the importance. And we also emphasize the importance of social distance and taking in consideration the culture in South Sudan. We feel that social distance as per se may not be understood by our people. Therefore, what we do is we go into details and tell them that it means you don't have to be close to people, at least keep a distance of 2 meters away from the next person.
The messages the truck play have been given out by the World Health Organization. The Citizens Task Force has contextualized them so that residents understand why they are being told to do certain things.
One of the biggest challenges that we have observed, and being a South Sudanese, is that it takes my people long to accept, and the myth that had been there has confused a lot, and there's so much miscommunication in society. Some people think COVID-19 is not about them, it's a foreign thing, and it's a disease that will not affect them as South Sudanese. Others are saying you take strong tea in the morning, which is all wrong. And what we are saying is that we are all human, and COVID-19 affects everybody.
UNMISS hopes that consistent messaging will get the people to adopt preventative behavior.
UNMISS is travelling right around the country. We're going to places like Leah, Ding Ding, but from Malakal right down to Yambio, across to Wau, and right down into the eastern Equatoria. We have the same message in the languages that people understand, which is keep safe, keep your distance, wash your hands. All of the same messages that I have to follow and everybody should follow. And in the POCs, particularly because everybody's so close together.
Climate environmentalists have demanded that the Swiss government's coronavirus aid package be channeled to making the country's economy more sustainable and help tackle climate change. But elsewhere in Britain and Belgium, environmentalists demand a better healthcare system and an end to pollution.
Campaigners delivered a petition to the extraordinary session of the Swiss Parliament, calling for it to use the 62 billion Swiss franc, that is, the economic emergency aid, in an environmentally friendly way. More than 22,000 people signed the petition, demanding the support for companies in sectors with large greenhouse gas emissions, like aviation, be tied to reducing their environmental impact.
We are here because we want to make it a green recovery. We need to foster measures that are helping us to quit fossil fuels now in the wake of Corona, because we need to make our society more resilient to the crisis that will come.
Greenpeace Switzerland climate experts insisted the government must promote measures to eliminate the use of fossil fuels and promote renewable energy. The Swiss financial industry should also fund sustainable solutions.
Right now, the government alone is kind of governing Switzerland, and now the parliament comes back. So I hope the parliament will do measures that help for a green recovery. We saw that the government, for example, is willing to give billions to Swiss without any climate obligations. That's simply not possible if you accept that we have a climate crisis. So we hope the parliament's going to correct this.
Zoe Roth from Basel said the COVID-19 crisis gave an opportunity to change thinking.
During this corona crisis, we saw how vulnerable this world is, how vulnerable this society is. And that shows me that in face of the upcoming and already here climate crisis, which is way bigger, that we really need to do something, and we need to take this crisis also as a chance to build a more just and more sustainable future.
Due to measures put in place to fight coronavirus, demonstrations in Switzerland are forbidden, and Greenpeace militants were immediately asked by police officers to leave. The Swiss Parliament met on Monday at the Bern Expo Exhibition Centre in Bern in place of its regular venue, so lawmakers can maintain social distancing rules. Climate change campaigners took part in an online demonstration on May 3rd with speeches and performances from an interactive video conference projected onto the front of the Parliament building. In Britain, protesters blocked the entrance to a site office for a planned high-speed rail line at London's Euston Station on May 4th, saying money should be diverted from the project to bolster health services battling the coronavirus pandemic. Wearing masks to prevent the spread of the virus, 2 people held a black banner across the road, forcing a lorry to turn back in what organisers said was part of a day-long series of actions at various sites across the country linked to the HS2 project. Protesters also blocked at least 11 entrances to HS2 sites in the country of Warwickshire in central England. People opposed to HS2 have spent years setting up camps and occupations at various points along the planned route to try to stop contractors raising ancient woodland for the project, which has also come under fire on cost grounds.
So I'm here for many reasons. Firstly, I'm here to show the injustice that we have a project going on behind us that is costing the taxpayer $100 billion, when our NHS workers do not have the correct PPE because of the underfunding that our government has done to the NHS. I'm also here to highlight the natural destruction that is taking place in this country. We have the biggest natural destruction since World War I, yet Parliament declared a climate emergency this time last year, and this is a climate emergency.
This railway, this track that is really not the priority for this nation at this time. It is really important for air quality, so air pollution, for the environment around Euston, where 17,000 people live and our children have to grow up, that this level of construction and disruption and demolition is ceased.
Supporters of the scheme say it will slash journey times between London and northern England and add capacity to Britain's crowded network. In the regions of Wallonia and Flanders, France is accused of being slow to warn them of pollution from a sugar beet plant in a river that flows across the border and has killed thousands of fish. Wallonia, which abuts the border with France, said between 50 to 70 tons of fish died in its territory along a 36-kilometre stretch of the Scheldt River, also known as Escaut. French sugar maker Terrios said a leak was found on April 9th in a 100,000 cubic metre settling pond at its factory in Escaut in northern France, leading to the spilling of sugar beet, rising water, and a river that flows into the Scheldt. Terrios said the leak was repaired on April 10th and the situation was back to normal by April 13th on the French side, after the installation of aerators in certain places of the river. It noted that the dead fish had been found nearly 70 kilometers downstream from the sugar refinery. The polluter risks a fine of up to €1 million in Wallonia only, according to Wallonia's environment minister. The Scheldt, in the French-speaking part of the country, runs from northern France to the port of Antwerp in northern Belgium, Europe's second largest seaport after Rotterdam. In a statement, France's Biodiversity Office sugar beet residues, very rich in organic matter, lead to an excessive consumption of oxygen in the water and fish asphyxia.
Food prices have spiraled in Democratic Republic of Congo in what the United Nations and some government officials have condemned, describing it as unscrupulous profiteering at a time of international crisis. Meanwhile, Mexico's cactus producers are reeling from the pains of coronavirus sting.
8 weeks after Congo recorded its first case of the novel coronavirus, Kinshasa's main food market still has plentiful stocks of tomatoes, plum, and other produce for the crowds and masked shoppers. On the surface, little has changed, but higher prices chalked behind some stalls point to what the United Nations and government officials have condemned as unscrupulous profiteering at a time of international crisis. Leah Nsubi, a vegetable vendor at the Nketambo market, says she has to sell her produce at a higher price. One shopper, Mireli, is stockpiling tomatoes in case prices spiral further out of control, as they did in the run-up to the government's abortive attempt to implement a citywide lockdown on March 28 to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Today, I see it got a little bit better, but when the government wanted to confine us for 4 days, we bought one tomato for 500 Congolese francs instead of 200 or 300. So today I'm buying more tomatoes and I keep them in the freezer because tomorrow everything can go up. Reeling from decades of conflict, Democratic Republic of Congo is already the second most food insecure country in the world, and that's according to the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. But with only 10% of its arable land cultivated and its infrastructure in ruins, Congo relies heavily on food imports. Its existing food systems and the livelihoods of smallholders and vulnerable people also likely to be heavily impacted in the longer term by restrictions on movement imposed due to epidemic.
Sure, there's been a slight price increase, but this increase has not gone beyond 1.2%. It's been regulated. The coronavirus has arrived all around the world. A few bad faith Congolese, mostly resellers, use this to play around with prices in markets. We raided some wholesalers. We controlled stocks which should cover the country until the month of July for many. After that, we went on the ground to witness this price increase. Measures have been taken. Inspectors are on the ground because it's their job. And as I speak, everything has been regulated. Well, at least 87%.
Economist Kitenge Lubanda says poor government planning is also to be blamed.
Kinshasa lives on two things. First, local produce, which come from Budundo and central Congo. And when we close regional borders, we realize that Kinshasa is worthless on its own. The city's supply logistics is not well organized. It's artisan. It is not efficient. If you add up on top of that the administration's and security forces' improvisations, we found out that it is organized chaos.
Economist Kitenge Lubanda says poor government planning is also to be blamed. The country's central bank had said that DRC will slip into recession this year for the first time in almost 2 decades, and forecasts that inflation will more than double to 9.9% compared to 2019.
The effects of the coronavirus crisis is also threatening traditional food supply chains in Mexico, where the production of the nopal or prickly pear cactus is dwindling. Nopal is a staple of Mexican food used in everything from tacos to salads or as a side dish to accompany meat. But on the hillsides of extinct volcanoes in the southern reaches of Mexico City, where it is grown, farmers are finding it necessary to grind up their harvest to use as mulch. The main cause of the decline in production is the lack of customers coming to the nopal and vegetable market in Milpa Alta, a borough of Mexico City. Fear of the coronavirus and the restrictions imposed by government on public gatherings are keeping customers away from the market, which in turn leaves farmers with a surplus on their hands. Mexico's economy has been battered by the coronavirus outbreak, and many are struggling to make ends meet as the country heads into its harshest recession in living memory. Government health workers have recommended Mexico extend measures to contain the coronavirus until May the 30th, though the health ministry says restrictions could be eased by May the 17th in areas where virus transmissions are non-existent or very low.
Finally on the program today, a Chinese shopaholic is now emptying her wardrobes due to COVID-19 outbreak. Find out what Jiang Zunjie is up to.
For years, Jiang Zunjie enjoyed buying nice things and chasing discounts. In doing so, she filled wardrobes after wardrobes with clothes, shoes, handbags, and other luxury items. After the coronavirus outbreak, the former shopaholic has now started to do the opposite. Jiang, who works as an accountant for a Chinese medicine company, has decided to embrace a simpler lifestyle and is using a popular app to offload many of her expensive consumer items.
After I went through my clothes, my shoes and my handbags, I suddenly thought I have far too much stuff. So perhaps I should pass these things on to people who need them.
Jiang, who has a 9-month-old baby, has already sold 50 items of used clothing using a trending app, Idle Fish. She plans to offload dozens more as part of her plans to consume less and cook more at home.
In the past, I yearned to possess those unnecessary things, but I would like to abandon that way of life. Perhaps in the future, when I buy clothes or other things, I would choose things that I truly need.
Jiang's new attitude to consumption may represent a broader trend in China. Bargain hunting on the internet has become a new habit for some Chinese, as the stigma that once hung over second-hand goods begins to fade. Report says posts with the hashtag #DitchYourStuff have trended on Chinese social media in recent weeks, garnering more than 140 million viewers. Appearing to confirm the trend, a recent McKinsey survey showed that between 20% and 30% of respondents in China said they would continue to be cautious with their spending.
And on that note, we draw the curtains on today's edition of Foreign Dispatches. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to keep up with all our top stories. Do it on channelstv.com. I'm Anne Nwawadu. I'll see you again soon. Don't forget, stay safe.